Welcome back to In Bed with Brooke. We're continuing with my read of Set It Free. I'll be reading for 5 to 10 minutes from Book 1 in the Heart and Soul series. We're still on Chapter 1, so sit back, relax, close your eyes, and enjoy their story. Picking up where we left off. Slater and Hayes met in high school when they were 15 years old. They had a few classes together, shared chin juts of acknowledgement toward one another as they crossed paths in the hallways. They bonded one day in a particularly boring biology class, rolling their eyes at one another as the teacher droned on and on about anaphase, telophase, interphase, and metaphase. Slater propped his chin on his hand, watching the teacher with bored eyes, perking up at the click of a lighter. He looked over at Hayes, seated at the desk next to him, who had had enough of boredom for one day and decided to light up a cigarette in class. "Give me a drag of that, man," Slater requested, holding his hand out for the smoke and inhaling deeply. The two of them exhaled at the same time. Plumes of smoke swirled above their heads. Within minutes, they found themselves in the principal's office, followed by after-school detention, ignoring the monitor's assistance for silence when they started talking music. They developed an immediate plan to start hanging out and make music together and discussing forming a band. Detention seemed to become a bit of a pattern for them. One couldn't think of Slater without thinking of Hayes, and if one got into trouble, the other was sure to follow. The two of them blew it off and started to prefer detention to their classes, and neither one of them cared how low their grades were slipping. The hour after school gave them time to plan their futures. Slater learned that Hayes got his nickname from being stoned all the time. He decided to embrace it and refer to himself by the one word. His foggy state of mind didn't bother Slater because, stoned or not, once Hayes picked up the bass and Slater could get his hands on a keyboard, they came up with some kick-ass tunes. 1 month into their junior year, Hayes took his love of pot a bit too far and brought it to school with him and lit up a pipe in class. He had already dealt with a handful of suspensions, but the drug paraphernalia was the final straw for the school, and he found himself expelled with a police record. Like he did in most bad situations, he smoked his way through it and shrugged it off. He decided to hitchhike his way to Hollywood with the intention to find a band to play with. The first year on his own was tough, playing random gigs here and there, feeding off whatever friends he could find. He got in touch with Slater as he was starting senior year of high school and convinced him to join him in the Golden State and form a band of their own. Slater didn't need much convincing. His family life had been strict, rigidly religious, and he was more than happy to get away from it. He joined Hayes shortly after he turned 18, living the life of struggling musicians for 8 years now. He briefly held on to odd jobs here and there. It had been a rough road, and there were times Slater wondered if he was doing the right thing, but the drive to make music couldn't be shaken. Becoming the world's biggest rock star was number one on his agenda. In the last 6 months, they had solidified their band members and were making serious strides, writing songs for an album and having consistent gigs. Slater Hart may not have a permanent roof over his head, but he had determination on his side, and he knew he was going far. Nothing was going to stand in his way. Alex put her hand to her stomach to calm her nerves as she reached for the doorknob. "Chill out," she chided herself. "Maybe these guys aren't as scary as Matt described." She took a deep breath and opened the door, smiling at Matt. Her smile faded as she saw the two men standing behind him. They weren't as scary as Matt had described. They were scarier. The guy to his left was slightly taller than Matt, alarmingly skinny and swaying as he stood. He had on tight jeans that accentuated just how thin his legs were, a plaid shirt topped with a leather vest and a cowboy hat. From what she could see of his hair, it was black and shaggy, falling just below the collar of his shirt. His eyes were covered with small, round sunglasses that sat atop a long, slim nose. His lips were thin, revealing surprisingly small teeth as he smiled at her and slurred, "Sup." "Alex," Matt made the introduction. "This is Hayes. Hayes, this is Alex." "Hayes?" she whispered to Matt in shock. "That's his name?" At Matt's nod, she held out her hand to greet him, confused and a little irritated as the guy gently punched her shoulder in greeting. He walked into her home and made himself comfortable on the chair next to the couch. She turned back to Matt to examine her next guest. To say he looked dangerous was an understatement. He was tall, with tattoos on his forearms and peeking out of his shirt sleeves, with long, dark red hair that hung over his shoulders. A straight nose, a brooding mouth, and the most amazing green eyes Alex had ever seen. They weren't dark green eyes that put you in mind of rainforests and Irish fields. They were light green and cat-like and seemed to glow into her skin as he stared back at her. He was slender, but not dangerously skinny like Hayes. She could make out muscle definition beneath his black t-shirt, and she could see strong muscles on his legs where his torn jeans clung. Alex thought he was the most beautiful man she had ever laid eyes on. She'd never been attracted to a man with long hair before, much less one with long red hair, but there was something about him that made her breath short and her knees shaky as she gave him a nervous smile. Slater gazed at the vision she made. Slater gazed at the vision she made. Time seemed to stand still as he looked at the beauty standing in front of him. She was small in stature, short in his opinion, guessing she'd prefer petite, with long brown hair, almost black, that fell in waves around her face and shoulders. Long, thick eyelashes framed sparkling deep brown eyes. Her skin was a mix of a golden tan and natural olive complexion, sun-kissed, if he were to describe it. Wow, she's pretty, really, really pretty, he thought. She was casual in loose jeans and a soft pink V-neck sweater, barefoot with her hot pink polished toes peeking out under the denim. He was captivated by her. He couldn't stop staring. A slow grin spread across his face as he noticed her staring back. Matt sensed the attraction between the two of them immediately. There was something about Slater that he disliked upon meeting him just an hour ago. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the moment they were introduced, he felt extreme irritation. Maybe it was Slater's edginess and cocky attitude that was apparent in his overall presence, or maybe it was the confidence he exuded. Whatever it was, Matt didn't like him, and he sure didn't like watching these two stare at each other like fools. He gladly interrupted their perusal, absently gesturing toward Slater and speaking quickly, his tone bored. "Alex, this is Slater Hart, Slater Alexander Lorraine." "Hi," Alex said softly, extending her hand. Slater shook her hand. Both of them pulled back quickly as they felt the shock. "Oh," Alex laughed lightly. "There must be static." Slater's grin widened, recognizing chemistry when he saw it. Something like that. Alex continued to smile at him, making him stomach dip when she... Oh my God, what is going on? Sorry, my timer's going crazy. We're just going to hide that down here. Alex continued to smile at him, making his stomach dip when she bit her bottom lip subtly. Alex stepped back from the door, not taking her eyes off Slater, Matt completely forgotten. "Please come in, make yourself comfortable." She glanced over her shoulder at Hayes with his legs draped over the arm of the chair and his cowboy hat covering his face, snoring lightly. "Hayes certainly has," she mumbled under her breath. Slater stepped in front of Matt, following Alex into the condo. He walked to the couch, stopped in front of the piano that caught his eye. His mouth salivated at the thought of playing it. Alex watched as he stroked his hands lovingly over the keys of the baby grand piano. Glancing up to see her watching him, he quickly pulled away like he'd been caught stealing and slid his hands into his pockets. "Do you play?" Alex asked. He nodded slowly, not taking his eyes off the instrument. "Yeah, do you?" "Sadly, no. Maybe one day I'll finally learn." Alex smiled at him as he stepped back from the piano and sat on the couch, glancing absently at Matt as he closed the front door, giving her a dirty look. She didn't give the glare a second thought as she followed Slater. There was something so magnetic about him. She wanted to get to know him. "So Matt tells me you guys are in a band. What's the name of it?" Alex sat cross-legged on the floor across from him, her back against the fireplace hearth. Slater laid his jacket over the arm of the beige sofa and sat back, crossing a knee over his ankle. "Our name's Heart and Soul. Tell me about your band. What kind of music do you play?" "We're awesome," Hayes slurred from his stoned slumber. Alex ignored Hayes, waiting for Slater to answer. "Rock and roll. It's the only way to be." He smiled at her and winked, making Alex's stomach flutter lightly. "Are you rock and roll or heavy metal?" "I'd say both. Do you like that kind of music?" Hayes chimed in. "I bet she's all over that top 40 shit." Alex gave Hayes a sidelong glance, rolling her eyes and looking back at Slater. "I like all kinds of music. I like rock and roll music, and I like some metal music, not the kind that's nothing but screaming voices that you can't understand and screeching guitars." Slater gave her a half smile. "I don't scream all the time, but when I do, it's understandable, and Chris doesn't screech on guitar." "How many people are in your band?" "There are 4 of us. There's me. I'm the lead singer. Hayes plays the bass, Chris is on guitar, and drummer plays the drums." "Drummer?" Alex laughed, confused. "Doesn't he have a name?" Hayes spoke up again, his voice barely audible and slightly muffled under his hat. He doesn't want to be defined by a name. He wants to be defined by what he does. He drums. I totally get that. He laughed at nothing in particular. Alex narrowed her eyes, deciding she didn't like him. Looking at Slater, she jerked her head towards Hayes. Is he always this much of an ass? Slater chuckled. He liked her forwardness. Not always. He's pretty tame. I'm the asshole. And you're proud of that, she wondered. Well, if you're going to be good at something. Slater let the thought trail off with a cocky grin. Alex leveled him with a look. Most people who I know that claim to be an asshole are the nicest people I've ever met. And we'll stop there for tonight. Hope you enjoyed this version of In Bed with Brooke, and stay tuned for more.